Good morning, committee. This House Judiciary Committee. It is the, I don't know, what is today? 15th. January 15th. Oh, right. It's AKA Founders Day. June the 15th.
And it's MLK's birthday.
And it's MLK's actual birthday. And we're in a briefing here for the House Judiciary Committee. We are joined today by soon-to-be great legal minds from the Boys Latin School, who are all here and are going to pay complete attention. Stand up. We'll see from you here. If you're here from Boys Latin, stand up. My goodness. All right. So we'll be quizzing you later as to the details of what's going to be presented today by the Montgomery County Police and from the ACLU. So we're going to have a briefing this morning on the use of drones in law enforcement. Over the summer, the Maryland Association of Counties, or MACO, asked me to MC an event at Ocean City during MACO about this issue. And at first I thought, well, I am familiar with it, but maybe not as familiar as I could be. And then I got to MC the event and I learned a whole lot more. And everyone who presented, both the county police and the ACLU, who you're going to hear from, were very interesting. There are a lot of different issues that are at play here. And I thought it was important to have them come and talk to us. So we're going to hear from the county police for about 10 or 15 minutes. We'll hear from the ACLU after that for 10 or 15 minutes and take questions in between. But it's an interesting program and something that I thought the committee should learn more about, and heaven forbid we should actually try to learn something. So with that, if we could have the Montgomery County Police come up, and then we'll switch and hear. At MACO they were all up at once, but we're going to do it the way we do it. So whoever would like to begin, and then after all three of them are done, we will take questions after that. Whoever would like to start.
Mark Yamada. I am as of July 1st of 2024, I'm the new Chief of Police for Montgomery County. Congratulations. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Commander Jason Kokinos, Montgomery County Police over the Silver Spring District.
And good morning, Lieutenant Tony Galladora, Montgomery County Police from the 3rd District in Silver Spring.
All right. Oh, good morning, and thanks to the chair and the committee for having us today. We appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of law enforcement in this program. So good morning to esteemed members of the Judiciary Committee. So this initiative, our drone is first responder. Police have been using drones and fire departments and things of that nature for many years. In Montgomery County, we've been using drones. The fire department started researching it in about 2018, and in about 2020, the police department started using them in a sense of mapping crime scenes and search and rescue and tactical situations and things of that nature. We saw a lot of success with that program that we then begun doing research in what we're here to talk about today, which is drone as first responder, which is another kind of avenue, a different program than some of the traditional law enforcement related drone use. And I do want to introduce, and I apologize, Sergeant Patrick Kepp, who is here as well. He's the supervisor of our air support unit. So this initiative that we started a little over a year ago, and it had been in the planning phases for about over a year before that, there's a lot of thought put into this and research, is not something that we created. This program started in Chula Vista, California. It's been going on for over 5 years in California, and they really laid the foundation of how this program should be built and run in many regards. We do things a little bit differently here, but we did learn from others, and we appreciate their help. This initiative reflects our commitment to leveraging technology responsibly to enhance public safety and help with staffing challenges while maintaining transparency and accountability. So the mission of the Department of Police for Montgomery County, our Drone as First Responder program, is to provide air support. And what's important here is air support for 911 calls and officer-generated calls. And I'll go into detail on why that's important in a little bit. And to do so in a safe, responsible, and transparent manner. So drone as first responder and how it differs from what many see in public safety drone usage is we are pre-positioning a drone stationed on the roof of a building to fly to a call for service and arrive prior to or in conjunction with first responders on the ground. So this is different than an officer getting on scene, opening the trunk of the car, and putting a drone up or something of that nature. So we achieve this by having a drone that's powered on. It's sitting on top of a landing pad on top of a tall building, and it's ready to go. And there's a staff member up on that roof, and they ensure the safety and readiness of the aircraft and the safety of the operation in the airspace to ensure we can quickly respond to public safety emergencies. We operate a DFR, Drone as First Responder Operations Room, centrally located in our county that's staffed with certified and trained officers in this program. In that room, officers have access to listening to police radios and other technology. We monitor 911 calls using a software called Live 911. And this software is really important, not only for drone as first responder, but in public safety in general. There's been a lot of success stories nationally with the Live 911 software. And this software allows us, when you call 911 as a community member, we can hear that call as soon as the 911 center answers. So we're in the operations room screening every 911 call that comes into the area that our drone operates in. And when that 911 call is made, we also can see the location of the caller. So when you call 911, it takes about, for us, on average, 2 minutes to process the information and then send it for dispatch. With Live 911 in the drone room, we see where you're at right away. We hear the emergency as you're describing it, and we can just send the drone. We don't need to wait 2-3 minutes. And then on top of that, once an officer gets dispatched, it could be 4 to 5 minutes, lights and sirens for him to get there. So we're cheating time by using this software, hearing the emergency right away, and sending the drone right away as soon as we hear what the emergency is. So the operations center then works in conjunction with the rooftop that can launch that drone. So officers in that operation room, when the drone is sent to the emergency, they can control the drone, the camera, they see a live feed, they can get critical information. Many times we're on the scene of an emergency before officers are there. Sometimes as they're getting dispatched, the drone is arriving to the emergency. So we're able to share a video link with officers, depending on the situation. But really what we do is, in Montgomery County, unfortunately, we don't have a helicopter. So we lack a perspective from the air. And the nice thing about this is we get there first, and from the air, we can see what's going on, and we're working the radio, we're sharing information with officers, we're telling them how to approach safely. You know, we've had instances on 911 calls where someone needed medical attention, they couldn't provide their location. We got the drone there, we said, hey, send them to the rear of this building, this is where they're at. So a lot of information is being shared in a way to make everybody safer and have positive outcomes.
One thing I did want to point out, the drone is not on patrol all the time. It's on that roof until that call comes in from 911. So we're not out and about looking around for things or people or cars until that call is received from 911.
Yep. Yeah, and that's, so it's definitely reactive in that sense to an emergency. So to date, the DFR program has safely responded to, we're almost coming up on 2,000 calls. We started November of 2023 with the pilot of this program, and we're almost at 2,000 calls for that. So we have some goals we'll talk about and what this program, what we envisioned it to do, and we'll kind of explain how we think that fits with some of the success we've had. So one thing we looked at is how can we improve police response times? How can we get a visual perspective to an emergency, to a call faster than our response times that we have? And I think, as explained with the software and how we're dispatching these drones, we're arriving between a minute and 60 to 75 seconds, depending, to get to an emergency immediately, much faster than officers on the ground. We're maximizing resource efficiency, so the drones do not replace the need for police officers on the ground, but what it can do is, in at least almost 16% of our cases, we get there We are in the operations room with sworn police officers. We're seeing what's going on. We can call the 911 caller direct from our operations room and engage that community member. And in over 280 calls, we've said, you know what? We don't need to send a police officer to this. We can handle it with the drone. We've freed up over 550 officers that then can respond to other calls or engage in other duties, whether it's community engagement or other things of that nature. So it is helping us from an efficiency standpoint. Real-time intelligence, again, that aerial perspective that we can improve situational awareness and decision-making, enhance safety and de-escalation. So because the drone gets there so fast, we've gotten calls for subjects armed with weapons. The drone gets there, we zoom in with the camera, we can see in their hands that they're not armed, or what a community member said looked like a gun is actually a cell phone. And this is information we've shared with officers that has reduced the intensity of responses and has resulted in better outcomes for everybody. We had a call recently of a subject armed with a large 2x4 striking another individual. The drone gets there, the guy's in the parking lot, he hears the sirens, he's still armed, he hides behind a dumpster. Had this police officer pulled into this parking lot, presumably up to this dumpster, the distance to that suspect would have been so close that if that individual came out and tried to attack the officer, it very well could have resulted in an officer-involved shooting. Because of the drone, we were able to say, hey, cruiser number 123, stop right there. The guy is 50 yards in front of you behind the dumpster armed, and we were able to give distance. When we allow officers to have distance, that's more time to make better decisions, to de-escalate, to communicate. Time is good, so we want that kind of stuff. So we've been able to do that. Locate and apprehend criminal suspects, and then also subjects. So it's not always criminals. Sometimes we're finding missing people. Lieutenant Galador was working one day when there was an autistic child that went missing at night. We were able to use the thermal technology of the drone to locate that child in a neighborhood. So we find missing people, people that have eloped from the hospitals, but also we do have a number of cases where we've apprehended criminal suspects. Just the other day, we had an armed robbery in Gaithersburg. The subject took off on foot into a large park. The drone was overhead, picked up on the suspect, got them safely in custody with a weapon and placed under arrest. So the operational impact, although operational for just a year, we believe it's made a substantial impact for our operations. We talked about that response times. We talked about we handled over 280 calls without the need for patrol. And then these cases have been critical in arrest, armed robbery, motor vehicle theft, theft from auto, burglary, assaults, and then some of those de-escalations I just talked about. We actually had as well, for those that read in the news, we had a stabbing that was captured on film because the call came in for an assault. The drone got there, and as the drone was relaying information, unfortunately, the suspect pulled a knife out and stabbed our victim in the arm and took off on foot. We captured that on the video of the drone, directed officers to safely apprehend that individual, and the video resulted in a conviction for assault out of Montgomery County Court. Our deployments and expansion, so currently we operate in Silver Spring, Maryland, Wheaton, Maryland, and our Gaithersburg, Montgomery Village area. We have a fourth site in Bethesda that is just about to be operational. It's slightly delayed, but we're working through that. And all of these locations have been selected based on not just at random, they're all data driven. So where are our calls for service, our busy times with staffing issues, call hold times, but then also community input. We actually have communities that are asking for this technology to be in their neighborhood. So we review those, and then we share that with our county executive and our county council. The further expansion of the program is at the discretion of our county executive and county council and our community input as well. So there is additional sites and areas that we have identified, but again, that all is driven by our community and our elected leaders. Transparency and privacy. From its inception, I will say in my career, I don't know about yours, boss, but in my career, about 20 years, I've never seen a program this transparent with our community. And it is something that has even opened our own eyes to see going forward with future programs and projects within the police department, kind of modeling the level of transparency we've had with this program that we're proud of. We've designed it with working in collaboration with our community, elected leaders, advocacy groups, things of that nature. We have formulated key protections. Very limited scope of use, as the chief said. It's not proactive patrol. It's not proactive general surveillance. It's responding to 911 calls and officer-generated calls. And what I say by that is if a police officer is driving and they see a crime or they see something, they can ask for that air support, much like you hear agencies asking for a helicopter or other officers to help out. We do not use drones for lawful First Amendment activities such as protests, demonstrations, expressing viewpoints. We do not introduce drones to that. We respect constitutional rights for everybody. So everything that we do with drones, we follow obviously the Fourth Amendment and things of that nature. And again, no proactive patrol or surveillance. We have implemented our own restrictions based on the camera. When the drone flies to emergencies, the camera is pointed up at the horizon line. It's not recording. We record no video while we're going to or from the emergency, and the camera is pointed up to and from the emergency. We want to have the least amount of visual intrusion into anybody on the ground level that we can. The camera comes down when the drone gets to the area of the emergency and focuses in the area of the information that we have for that emergency. Recording and retention of video. Video, we have not recreated the wheel. We have police body cameras, in-car cameras, things of that nature. So we mirror our video to those other videos. So the drone video is retained as evidentiary. It's logged and tagged the same as our body camera and our video. And everything is subject to the same MPIA and requests that could be made.
If there was ever a question from the public about a certain call for service, you can go onto our website. Every mission, every flight is recorded. You can see the map, exactly where the drone goes, how it came back, how long it was up, the type of the call, any information associated with the call, and that is on our website within 24 hours.
Yep. Yeah, so we, yep. And the prohibited features, so, and this came from engaging our community as well, is we do not equip the drones with the ability to hear audio. There's no audio interception. If you're having a conversation, we're not going to hear it. And we do not integrate any facial recognition technology into our drone technology. So that facial recognition is a separate program, and that does not interface with our drones while they're operational or anything of that nature. And that's all done. Those things were additions we added to our policies based on community feedback and engagement that we've had. So as the chief mentioned, we do have a public-facing dashboard that we continue to expand and improve as we hear feedback from the community. Like the chief said, the drones are listed on there. The cameras we added recently based on actually some feedback from Jay Stanley, who you'll hear from, and some other people in the community. We published the type of camera that we're using and the capability, so people can read about that. Like the chief said, every flight, date, time, the dispatch number, incident description, and flight path is all logged and put on the public dashboard. We do not publish the videos of the flight on our website because those are evidentiary and those are logged separately, but you can see the map and the flight plan. Furthermore, we have Data Montgomery, as many counties in Maryland have data portals for their communities. You can cross-reference the incident numbers from the flights of drones to other informational sources in Data Montgomery should you want to dig deeper into some other data sets that exist. Statistics on call types, response times, total calls, and incidents without requiring ground officer involvement are all published on an interactive Power BI chart that's on our website. I'm going to turn the next section of our remarks, we have a few more, over to Lieutenant Galladora. So, yeah, you want.
Thank you. I'm going to focus quickly on community collaboration. Our DFR program was developed with significant input from our community. Before implementation, we conducted extensive outreach, including public forums, engagement with community organizations and businesses, and input from privacy advocates. And I appreciate our council for hosting many of those public meetings and making sure we had the right people in attendance at those meetings. Their feedback helped shape our program policies, including operational safeguards. We continue to engage with our community throughout with regular updates, public reporting, and opportunities to dialogue to ensure our program remains aligned with their values and expectations. There is federal oversight and training. As part of this program, the national airspace is regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA. We collaborate with the FAA and the TSA extensively to obtain the waivers and approvals to conduct these types of operations. We have waivers to operate beyond visual line of sight in certain areas of the county, and also waivers to operate in the flight restricted zone, which is an area in the lower part of our county near Washington, D.C. All of our DFR officers are certified to operate as remote pilots under FAA Part 107, and we also conduct additional training, which includes a 40-hour basic drone operations course, an air support officers course, teleoperators course with field training and mentoring, monthly training, and required training flights. Some of our team members also have the opportunity to attend national conferences that focused on drone-related discussions. Thus far, we have found the DFR program to be highly successful at meeting our stated goals and enhancing public safety in our community. As part of our ongoing assessment of the program, we are in the early stages of potentially partnering with academic institutions to engage in a third-party analysis and explore various parts of our DFR program. And in closing, the success of our DFR program is really a testament to the collaboration between the Montgomery County Department of Police, our local elected officials, our federal partners, and our community. Everyone's active participation has ensured the program is both effective and respectful of the rights and privacies of those we serve. And the Drone as First Responder program has demonstrated how innovative technology can safely and responsibly enhance public safety while maintaining transparency and trust. So thank you for your time and interest, and we welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you all very much. There'll be questions, I feel confident. We'll start with Delegate Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll try not to drone on and on.
Our next question from...
I first want to briefly acknowledge Montgomery County Councilwoman Dawn Lutke, who's here. I have two particular questions. You mentioned the anecdote of the fact that you were able to help an officer because you could tell with the drone that somebody had a 2x4, so you had him pull up here instead of there and all that stuff. Has there been a decrease in the number of disability claims or injuries on the job because of the drone? And my other two brief questions are also, you mentioned a gentleman who was on his cell phone instead of the gun, which his neighbor reported. Is the footage for somebody who just sees wrong and somebody who's just innocently talking on their phone when a caller gets it wrong, is that deleted? And finally, how much has the county saved? Because you said there were 80 calls that you didn't have to send Tom, Dick, or Harriet to and the drone took care of?
Make sure.
Let me know if you want him to go one question at a time.
I brought a pen. I was expecting
Good.
multi.
All right, that's fine. Just a gentle
Sorry if it
request
was
to the
too much.
committee. Lots of questions at once. Let's go one at a time, and I'll recognize you to do your next question.
Oh, okay, I was just
No,
trying
you're
not
good.
to
You were
take
being
too much
efficient.
time.
That's
but-
fine. But I'm trying
So
to answer the questions.
So we have not done a large analysis on correlating to officer injury with regards to the drone. However, what we can say based on our experience of the calls, because the drone is not everywhere in our county, it's only in certain areas. Because of the information, we have seen cases that we can say for sure have led to a reduced use of force or no force in certain circumstances, which we could say prevented injury of not only officers but individuals that we came into contact with. So we know for certain we've de-escalated and reduced force in certain cases, so we can presume that injuries could have been prevented, but we don't have broader data on work-related injuries larger. The video retention, all video, body camera, police, everything, no matter what, even if the call ends up being bogus, does get tagged and retained. We have a minimum retention period if it's a non-evidentiary call. Obviously, we have to retain video as in our policy for that, but it would get deleted after a period of time, unlike if it was a confirmed crime where the retention could be multiple years depending on the type of crime. And then the savings, so unfortunately right now, and we're working, this is not only a local problem, I think everyone in the state has this issue and nationally, is we have a staffing issue. So whereas the drone is helping us by handling some of these calls, we still need the officers, we still need to hire more people. So it's efficient in some regards now, but it's not saving money in the sense of replacing the need to hire officers and things of that nature. But it is more efficient with our time. And there is a cost savings with regards to not having to send an officer driving a vehicle, burning fuel, things of that nature to a lot of these calls. But right now we're just trying to, with our staffing crisis, maintain the best we can, a high quality of service in response times and handling these calls and stuff like that. So the drone has helped with that.
And what I would like to point out is the injury piece, it's kind of hard to quantify a lot of times. What I can tell you is in terms of injury to officers, we're also looking at potential injury to the person we're responding to as well, and to avoid that. This drone gives the officer an increased amount of information in a much quicker time and allows them to do what I think everybody in this room wants every police officer who works in their neighborhood to do, and that makes the best decision possible. So that's what this drone does.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I'm going to go from my left and kind of work around the horseshoe. If other people's lights go on, I'll add as appropriate, but it's going to be Grammer, Sample, Hughes, Cardin, Toll, Simmons, and Phillips. Delegate Grammer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to clarify, did you say in some cases drones arrive to the scene within a minute, or they decrease the time to reaching the first response by a minute?
No, you're right. In our Silver Spring and Wheaton areas, we have drones, and I mean in all three of our areas, we have drones sometimes even getting there faster than a minute. Depends how far it has to travel. We try to position the drone location central to our high call volumes areas. So we have, for example, downtown Silver Spring, we have it centrally located. Sometimes we get a lot of calls at the around the movie theater area, the shopping area, and that's literally 30 seconds once it's in the air to go 2 blocks over. So our average response time to 911 calls is between a minute and 75 seconds.
Okay.
Once it's up.
Thank you. I didn't catch this. For which issues, crimes, responses is a drone sent, as opposed to saying we're not sending a drone, we're just sending an officer?
So we did work on this when we created the program, and this was in collaboration with our community and such. So basically, it's easier to say what we're not flying to. We do not fly to calls that occurred earlier where no suspect is on scene and there's no safety issue. We don't respond to noise complaints. So there was, where this came from was a couple years ago in New York, they were sending drones on Labor Day to loud parties in the backyards. We don't send drones to that. We don't send drones to parking complaints or barking dogs or things of that nature. So we focus more on the in-progress crimes where suspects may potentially be on scene, or there's information that there's a safety concern.
So you don't have any like statute or regulation that limits, you have a pretty broad scope to say this is a situation where we will send a drone. It's not like you have a list of crimes that you do or don't.
So we do have a list. We have what we call an operational order of procedure in-house that all of our call types are computer-aided dispatch coded. So we actually have a list of every CAD code type that we will not fly.
Okay.
And that's shared with all of our pilots during training. So if this call type shows up, let's say it's, noise, it'll come up as noise, and the pilot sees that, that's one that we don't fly. So they know through training we don't fly to those. And then we have a program manager that audits the program and checks compliance on things.
Can you share that list with the committee?
Yeah, sure. I don't have it with me right now, but I'm
That's
happy
okay.
to.
One
yeah.
final question. Can you comment on the percentage of drone dispatches where you've avoided the need to send an officer for that particular situation?
Yeah, so of all the drone flights we've had, we're averaging roughly, and it changes each day, about between 15 and 16% of calls that the drone has gone to, we've not needed police officers to continue to those emergencies. Now, we're not flying 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we're only flying right now in 3 limited areas. So that's, but in those areas, that's the percentages.
Awesome, thank you.
And by not sending the officer, we might also be able to identify a situation where we send another agency, HHS, homeless advocacy group, somebody like that, besides the police.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today, and thank you so much for your service. This information is very exciting to hear about. Just 2 things for you. I know we mentioned about cost savings, but I wanted to know what the cost was because you are expanding, so I was just curious what that looks like. And then when you also mentioned about helping with an autistic child, so my question is, do you also aggregate out like what responses you attend to? For instance, if it was a silver alert, I know oftentimes we have, persons that have dementia and they go missing. It's just like, no clue, like what happened or where or something to that nature. So I was just curious if you were able to shed some light on that as well.
Yeah, so we, each flight, after the flight lands, the operations room has a series of administrative tasks that they do. They input the data that goes to our public dashboards, but then also we have a nightly report where each flight is noted in a report and a narrative of what happened on that flight. So when we have the case where an autistic child or a missing child is found, those are all codified in our daily logs that we keep internally. So we know what type of cases and what the outcomes are in that. And then your other question was related to the cost.
Yes, the cost.
So the cost today, let's say there was an agency in the state that wanted to start this program in the upcoming months or next year. The costs are going to be different because the wild thing about this is technology is changing so rapidly. The technology that's available today was not available when we started this program even. That's how things are changing. So there's FAA regulation and waivers that have just changed. There's some exciting opportunities on the horizon, as well as technology that will make this extremely cheaper to run. Our cost right now, our last year's budget was $773,000 for 4 sites. The bulk of that, about $600,000 of that expense is we are paying contractors to be at each site on the roof. That for us, because we are operating in the flight restricted zone, our federal partners have mandated that we have a human on the roof of each drone site to maintain a visual line of sight in that flight restricted area, and also based on our waivers. Now, the exciting thing is, going forward, is there is a new waiver that if you fly your drone below 200 feet and you have certain safety requirements, it eliminates the need for the human to be on the roof. Wow. So imagine if you didn't need the humans, that's $600,000 less dollars. So really, you could be running a program like this, for $100-something thousand a year potentially, right? So we're moving towards a direction where we believe the future of this program will actually start to cost us less as the new regulations come out, our relationships with the federal agencies and the allowances they're going to start to do. So again, this was so new and there was so much regulation that we had to do extra things. But as this is expanding nationally. New York City Police just started doing this, other Las Vegas, other agencies. So the FAA and the TSA have started making tweaks that make it easier to engage in this, which is going to make it cheaper.
Okay, thank you so much. And I was just curious, sorry, one more thing. Would you see a mutual aid agreement occur with you in another county, or would this be something that other county has to do standalone, like your neighboring county? I was just curious.
So right now, our certificate of authorization through the FAA is only for our jurisdiction. Now, if we needed to fly in a neighboring jurisdiction, we can call a phone number to get approval for that with our federal partners. We would have to get clearance before we can do it. The thing about the drone is it doesn't replace the need for crewed aviation in some regards. So the drone can only fly, you got a battery, and it only lasts, 50 minutes. So you got to have enough juice to get there and back. Now, for example, if we had a drone site that was very close to a neighboring jurisdiction and they needed help, we could fly over and fly back as long as it's within an area that we can get back with our battery. Versus if you had a helicopter, you can fly for a couple hours up there, So.
And we do have a few mobile drones in a drone vehicle. So they respond much like a canine officer, not attached to a fixed site. They can drive somewhere else outside of the normal flight range, or in addition to, if there's 2 calls for service, something like that.
Yeah, and we've had that where we've assisted other jurisdictions where we've driven a drone to their area and helped them.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, we had a couple people jump in the list, so we'll go Conway, Crutchfield, then Cardin, and down the line here. Conway.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, panel, for coming in. So you just said something that's very interesting. Have you ever driven to Baltimore to use your drones? Okay.
I'm not.
Did we?
We've assisted with search warrants with our neighboring jurisdictions as a part of, and this is separate from the drone, as a first responder program. These are those mobile drones, so to speak, that could be in the back of the vehicle. When we have our operations with our SWAT team and our emergency services unit, drones are a part of that for overwatch and security of that scene. So we have collaborated with, when we've executed search warrants in other jurisdictions, our drones have gone up there for that, yes.
2 different programs, though.
Yeah, two totally different programs. Separate drone is first responder, and then the
Tactical.
Yeah,
Okay.
tactical side.
Does the drone have a license plate reader or spotlights on it?
Ours do not have license plate readers. The drone is first responder, does not have a spotlight. However, we do have one that we're testing, kind of like a helicopter, how you can have a light that comes down, but we're not using that currently.
Okay, when a person calls you an emergency call, are you able to track their cell phone using the drone?
Not using the drone, but we can see where a 911 caller is calling from based on similar software that our dispatch center has, viewable from the
ping software, is that?
It's Rapid SOS. It's a software that allows, in an emergency, it shows where the caller is calling 911 from. But that's nothing to do with the drone, but that is used in the operations room to locate people in distress and stuff. But we're not tracking anybody's phone with the drones or anything like
Yeah,
that.
but to be clear, you can connect the 2 together, is that correct?
No, those are
cannot.
Not for us. Our live 911 and our dispatch center software does not merge into any of our drone technology that we're using.
Okay, did you have any discussion about weaponizing your drones?
We do not do that.
All right, and you say you fly up to 200 feet, is that correct?
Our drones, our approval is maximum of 400.
400.
We fly generally between 320 feet and 400 feet, as our areas of operation we have some high-rise urban areas, so we stay above those buildings at that altitude.
And what's the height restriction for a citizen using a drone?
Same thing, you can't fly drones over 400 feet without special approval.
So if a citizen is flying a drone and they hit your drone, is that a chargeable offense?
That wouldn't be a good day, but the way...
Not for you, but some people on YouTube think that's a good day.
Well, so the thing that's interesting about drones is drones are treated no different than aircraft by the FAA. So if we are supposed to yield way to crewed aircraft. So if an airplane, like this thing you saw in California, there should have never been a drone flying near that fire plane. So for us, and this is one of the reasons why at the state and local level, we cannot take drones out of the sky, because technically that's only a federal right. That's an aircraft when it's up there. They treat a drone as an aircraft. So if you crash into another drone or do something like that, you could face significant penalties from the FAA and the
Yes,
federal government.
Well, I was asking because suppose a drone is flying over someone's backyard and they use one of the anti-drone devices and shoot your drone down, can they be charged?
Federally.
Okay. And do you respond to complaints of alleged outdoor marijuana usage?
We're not, we fly drug type calls, but we don't fly marijuana calls unless there's some safety component.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Yamada and staff, for being here for this presentation. I just wanted to just ask you if you could just briefly talk about the pilot program before we got to this point, and also if you can tell us how many drones are currently being flown in the airspace, and then a little bit about the transparency that you mentioned, because you mentioned how this is one of the most transparent programs, you know, to the community. Just a little bit about those three things, if you don't mind. Thank you.
So the pilot started mid-year, no, at the beginning of last year, correct?
November 2023.
And it lasted about, I don't know, 6 months-ish. And we had the two sites, Wheaton and Silver Spring. And that was, it's funny when people say the pilot program, we talk about drone pilots at the same time, but that's where we piloted the drone program in those two sites. We've now expanded up to 6D. We're looking at the 2D site as well. Is that what you're?
Yes, and so as a result of the pilot program, then you determined that there was enough community support.
Correct.
To then expand it and go to the county council. And
Correct.
Okay.
Yep,
and
exactly.
Determine, okay.
Yep. And so that pilot program, which we kept, and one of our council members, Don Lukey's here from our Public Safety Committee, we would present information to our Public Safety Committee, and then obviously in the budget that went into effect July 1st of last year, that's where the expansion to the other sites was funded, and additional hours for Silver Spring and Wheaton as a result of the preliminary pilot program data.
And when you talk about the transparency, I refer everybody back to the website.
Okay.
If anyone had a question about any flight, any mission, it's downloaded by call type, the description, the flight path, the time, everything. You can see it. It's all right there for you. It has a CR number or a report number attached to it if there was any report written. The information is widely available and within, like I say, 24 hours usually, typically.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
many times faster. So we have the transparency page, like the chief just mentioned. We also, on our website, we have an email address and a phone number that residents, community members can email questions or call if they wanted to. And still to this day, we're fielding requests. We've honored every request that we've received to go speak to public groups, schools, communities, businesses. And Tony, Lieutenant Galador here has done a lot as well. I mean, everything from Chamber of Commerce's to civic associations. Nothing's too big or too small. We'll go meet with whoever. We got one on deck for a retirement type community in another part of our county that we're not even servicing with this program, but they were interested, so we go talk to them.
Is it a large retirement community?
It's
Perhaps one of the largest ones in the.
No, it is not. It's actually up in, it's actually up. Yeah, it's actually.
I was just asking a question for a friend who's.
It's up in Rockville, actually. It's not far from our King Farm neighborhood, but it's not up in the Fort Wheaton.
Not in my district.
Leisure
District
Well.
19.
So, so we, when I say very transparent is like, we've done town hall, and a lot of this was successful, the transparency, because of the partnerships with our elected leaders, their staff, our community groups, the Chamber of Commerce's and stuff. Tony just even went to a neighborhood association meeting last week where they asked about the drones. So we constantly are sharing information and also taking feedback and improving, and we're still to this day, if someone today said, hey, I think you could do better transparency here, we'd love to hear it. Let's take some notes. Let's talk about how we can do it.
And I think what you've seen here with this program, the amount of collaboration, and Councilmember Luke, you can probably speak to this, is unprecedented between the police department, the county council, the county executive, our regional services director, our communities. Everybody has had a hand in this, and it worked seamlessly in the end, believe it or not.
And for a number of drones, the Drone as First Responder program, which is different than our other program, we have 3 current sites with a 4th one about to come online. We have 6 big drones that operate those. So we have 4, but then we always want to have 2 backups in case you got a maintenance issue. Our other program, we have a variety of smaller drones that do different things, and I think we're somewhere around do you know, Pat, about just under 30 maybe? Yeah. About under 30 drones that do different things, mapping. You can make 3D pictures and stuff of an accident scene or whatever, different things like that.
And ideally, at each site, you'd like at least 2 of the drones. We only have 1 at each site, but 2. You'd mentioned the timeout takes battery, time back gets battery. If you could make it so that it's a seamless transition, when you swap out the batteries, that would be a much better scenario. We don't have that right now.
And that's the future with a lot of agencies. What you're seeing, if you look at New York and different agencies, they're putting drones in these little boxes, and you put 2 of them next to each other. If you get the right approvals where you can send the drone, and then if it's busy, you can send them, as one's charging the battery, you can send the other one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all very much for coming and really for a great presentation. Transparency, we all love, I love transparency, and I'd love to be able to replicate this program across the state to try and save time, lives, money, increase the confidence and the belief in our law enforcement systems, because it just seems like you're doing everything right, so that's great. You answered almost all the questions that I already had but I was interested in whether your program interacts with non-law enforcement drones, how you handle that, or whether there are times that there's a confusion between them and then you maybe get caught up in some of these folks who are not following the FAA regulations, and how do you deal with that? And the reason I say it's because we had some issues both over Camden Yards and over M&T Bank Stadium with people, private citizens using drones, and law enforcement was kind of, in the beginning, was unsure how to handle the situation.
Yeah, this is something that's evolving, right? And just like with any of this technology, stuff that when we started this program a little over a year ago didn't necessarily exist. That is existing today and continues to exist. So there's a couple things that need to be done and could be done at the state level. Obviously, we need some things at the federal level done as well. Looking at, for us, there is technology now that exists for us to see other drones, counter UAS technology. And you're seeing that after that AFC game incident in Baltimore, where a lot of the NFL stadiums now have technology that would allow to observe where is a drone, where is it coming from, and who's flying it type stuff. Montgomery County, we don't have that. There is a significant cost to some of that. So we have priced out and looked at some of those technologies that are just now getting approved for use by public safety. So I think when we talk about going forward across the state or even locally, it would be very valuable to investigate counter drone technologies so we can be aware of where these drones are, and then funding for those, because it is kind of pricey. And depending what counter drone technology you go to, if it's something that multiple jurisdictions use the same, you can mesh them together. So it could become a little cheaper if you partner with surrounding communities and stuff. So like, for example, the NFL stadiums may be using one type of system that if is meshed in with, say, the city of Baltimore, or Prince George's County, or Montgomery County, you can expand that awareness. We do not have the ability at the local level to mitigate drones. We're allowed to see where they are, but we can't take them out of the sky. And that's something that I think going forward at the federal level, potentially at state and federal agency levels working together, there can be some expansion to that, especially with the concerns with terrorism related to drones as weapons, different things like that. We're very early, I think, in this. I think it's expanding fast, but I do think lawmakers at the federal level, and I would imagine clearly here we're having this session today at the state level, are thinking about, like you are, some of those things. How can we deal with those nefarious drones?
Okay, great, thank you.
Tolles, Simmons, Phillips. Delegate Tolles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions. It's like 4. Do you want me to ask 2 and come back, or? It's Founder's Day.
One at a time and I'll come back.
Okay, 1 at a time. 2? More people have done 2. 2.5. Okay.
Delegate Tolles, you made your case for vote noise like.
Oh, you didn't want to hear my questions? Oh.
Thank you very much.
Come back and see us. Okay. Well, one question, thank you for coming. Oh, I feel bad now. One question.
From my district.
One question was asked for cost. And a couple other questions, I can't understand my handwriting. In terms of, how did you choose what neighborhoods to put the drones in? And why those neighborhoods?
Yep, so we looked at everything initially on screening was data-driven. So we looked at what's our officer staffing problems, our shortage areas, and where are the highest volumes of calls, crimes, and things of that nature. So think of it as we have a lot of calls in this area. We're short officers here. We got to do something to help public safety. This is one tool in the toolbox. It's not going to solve all the world's problems. So we looked at it based on data. We said, okay, these are our hot spots of emergency calls and overlapped with areas that are short officers. And also we did, and we have going forward, are seeing a lot of community input that we still rely on the data-driven approach to support it, but we do listen to community members that have been asking for it also.
Okay, and so do you have, like, say, drones in, I don't know, Potomac?
No, but we are starting a site in the Bethesda area, downtown Bethesda. The program is primarily better suited for more dense areas
Like
with
Silver Spring?
high call volume. So Gaithersburg,
Downtown,
Germantown.
Silver Spring,
Downtown
okay.
Silver Spring, downtown Wheaton, and then downtown Gaithersburg.
Okay, I
downtown
represent
Bethesda.
Montgomery County. I was just curious in terms of where the drones were, in terms of population of, folks. In terms of the data, like with the body cameras, one question you answered that for cost. So do you have to store that data to come back and need to use that, say, for court? Or for if that,
Yeah, so we're, every law enforcement uses different companies. We're an Axon agency, so our body cameras and everything is through Axon. So we use a software called DroneSense, which is part of Axon, partner with Axon. So everything seamlessly works for us. So our video from the drones, the body cameras, it all seamlessly goes into the same kind of storage facility. And because of our contract, we have storage for all that. It doesn't cost us more.
No extra cost for that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I like that.
Yep.
Switching gears, in terms of the crimes like carjacking, obviously, I think that has, knock on wood, gone down a bit nationally with new research and technology, but do you find it useful in those times when someone would make a call, someone took my car, and you're trying to locate it quickly? Do you think that the drones are useful for that? And then kind of a follow-up, different question, but follow-up. Do you think that for the carjacking, but let me back up, let me start over. You only use drones when someone called 911, and then, for example, if someone calls regarding my car got stolen, is this a good time when you would kind of use the drones to help locate that stolen car quicker?
Yeah, so we have gone up for stolen cars and carjacking calls. And so the drone's bread and butter is if someone was to run away on foot, let's say they were to bail out of a car or they were to abandon the vehicle. In a vehicle pursuit, the drone is a very limited technology. One, because of the battery life, the speed the drone can only go, depending 34 miles an hour up to 51 miles an hour, and the distance. So in vehicle pursuits or active mobile vehicles at high speeds, we find crewed helicopters to still be a benefit to tracking those vehicles. But we've had many cases where vehicles, someone called in and said, I'm tracking my own stolen car, and the drone got overhead, saw the vehicle, and then we got officers to come in. That person crashed the car and ran on foot, so the drone was able to follow this person running, and that was helpful. But if the vehicle just stays mobile, it's going to go outside of our ability of the drone.
And you only use it when you call 911. You only use the drones when you call when someone calls 911.
Yeah, correct. Or if an officer identifies a crime in progress. So, for example, if an officer sees a crime happening, they can request the assistance of that tool.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop for now. I have a couple other questions. I'm sorry.
And I was going to say, keep in mind with the pursuit stuff, the stolen cars, downtown Silver Spring butts right up against the District of Columbia. We cannot fly in there. So as soon as they cross that line, that's a no-go.
That's a fair point. And we do have a drone program in Prince George's County I represent Prince George's for anyone that is listening. I've been in contact with our FOP there just to see how it's used. So I've been asking them questions while I sat here as well. So
well, we are thankful for them because they are probably our main partner that helps us with their helicopter.
Yeah.
Because although we have a DFR program, we request the Prince George's County Guardian helicopter quite often because, again, this is a tool. There's limitations. This tool might be better for this tool might be better for that. And we find, particularly with tracking stolen and carjacked vehicles, that the helicopter is beneficial, especially when it goes down to DC, up to Prince George's, back to Montgomery, and kind of around those jurisdictions.
Awesome. I will let the FOP and Chief Aziz know that you appreciate the partnership. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chief.
Delegate Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for coming out today. Just kind of follow up to what we're talking about around the area of mutual aid with the drone and with the aviation unit. Can you just draw down a little bit more on, obviously, the mutual aid when it comes to the limited capabilities of the drone and the expansion of physical aviation with assistance? When you talked about a little bit about if something was to escalate, a crime escalate, or using LPR technology where they alert, or a BOLO, and how that would help.
Yeah, so one example is we have license plate reader technology. We have one on Georgia Avenue coming up from Washington, D.C. So car comes through, it's wanted in a stolen vehicle, felony crime. We put the drone up, officers see the vehicle, the individuals get out and they run from the car, the drone can track them. So when we talk about mutual aid, down in Montgomery County, we're in the COG, Council of Governments, so we have mutual aid agreements with all our surrounding areas, and up through Anne Arundel as part of that as well. So if we get a request from another agency to assist, we will, obviously the chief approves, we will help out, and we do that regularly. Not just with drones, but for all types of things. And much so too with the aviation, crewed aviation. Again, Prince George's County, Maryland State Police is a partner. Washington, D.C., actually, their helicopter helps us out quite a bit. And we actually have engaged them and can coordinate where we can have a drone flying and the drone pilot communicates with the helicopter pilot, and they can say, okay, I'm going to stay at this altitude, you stay at that altitude. And we've had cases where we've used drones and helicopters at the same time looking for carjacked vehicle robbery suspects, things of that nature. So again, all the tools sometimes come together, but it is a big team effort between multiple jurisdictions because some counties have what we don't, we have sometimes what they don't, so we all help each other as much as we can.
Sure. May I have a follow-up? Yes. So y'all don't send your drones outside the county or outside your jurisdiction?
Only if we're requested by another jurisdiction. Depending what that request is, we may have to get clearance from the FAA to do that. It depends on the request and where it's at.
Sure. Can you give me a rough estimate of how many times y'all request mutual aid from an outside agency with their aviation unit?
I don't have a hard number. I know that our district down in Silver Spring is probably the heaviest user. We most frequently go to Prince George's County because they're out of College Park and we're right next door. But we do, I'd say a couple times a month, are asking for aviation assistance from helicopters, whether it's Maryland State Police or Prince George's County.
It's probably a number we could supply to the committee if you were interested in it.
Yeah.
Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen. I'm really interested in the use of this technology for public safety. And I think, as you mentioned, situational awareness often helps to reduce negative engagement in communities. So really, really supportive of that. I have some questions, and they may be more kind of somewhat on the technical side. So you talked about the tactical beyond visual line of sight, right? And so if I understand, so you have a waiver so that you can go beyond the visual line of sight?
Yeah, so outside the flight restricted zone, which is going to be basically outside of Maryland 200, as it comes through Montgomery County. So Rockville, North, Gaithersburg, Germantown, we have a beyond visual line of sight waiver. Now, our waiver allows us, we have a person on the roof. That waiver says we have to see 2 nautical miles around where the drone is. So if we fly the drone 3 miles, we have to have 5 miles of sight, which on a clear day at an elevated position you can see. So we do have a waiver for beyond visual line of sight in the Gaithersburg, Germantown, Northern Rockville area. Down in Silver Spring and Wheaton, because it's in the flight restricted zone, our waiver there is different. We have to maintain a visual line of sight. So we fly a smaller operational area in Silver Spring, Wheaton, and Bethesda. It's 1.2 nautical miles from our rooftop that we can continuously see the drone. But up in Gaithersburg, we fly out to 3 miles, depending on the emergency.
So with the locations you have today, about what percentage of the county can you cover just using drones?
The DFR program,
Well, the county itself is, I think, about 510 square miles.
It's big.
yeah, it's a big county.
I'm in a big county. I'm Baltimore County.
It's
so
a
I'm just
very
curious.
small percentage of the entire county.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe 10% or something.
Yeah, a lot less.
But you mentioned that there might be a change with FAA that would allow you not to have to put somebody on the roof. Is that what they're doing in New York?
Yeah, so basically it's if you fly below 200 feet, you can go up to 50 feet above a building, and you have certain safety protocols, which we do have in Montgomery County. We are in the preliminary stages of looking to apply to this particular waiver, which would allow us, essentially what you could do there is you don't have to have a human there. You can put these docks, they're called these boxes. You could put them on top of fire stations. You could put them, and they can go up. Now they're going to fly a smaller area because the drone is smaller. But in theory, you wouldn't be paying $600,000 for contractors. You buy these docks, they're about $40,000 a piece. And yeah, you can start placing them more frequently and get better coverage in an area, and with the waivers.
No, I was going to say.
No, he said something else, and I wanted to, this was a question I had. And you can go ahead and say whatever you wanted to say. But this was a little bit of a concern for me. So you have contractors that are flying the drones. They're not sworn officers.
So we have contractors that are on the roof. They are the pilots in command. They have the controller for safety purposes. But once we do everything out of the operations room, so when we get a 911 call, we have a piloting software. It's the same software that the rooftop person has, but it's what's called remote. So we can punch in the address of the emergency in our operations room. The drone will take off and fly to the emergency. And then once the drone gets there, the operations room, using a PlayStation 5 controller, can move the camera and things of that nature. The person on the roof, under our current setup, does have the ability to take control of the drone in a safety emergency, and they're ultimately responsible for it as the safety person, but a sworn officer is the one viewing the video, relaying that to other police officers, making those law enforcement decisions, but the civilian rooftop contractor is ultimately our main safety piece.
So just a couple of things. It would probably help if you all could see the video presentation that we have, which we don't have today. But this launch person who is on the roof, they're in Silver Spring. All they do is really pretty much launch that drone, and they are able to see. The pilot is then located in Rockville, about 10 miles away in another room, and they have the controls. So the rooftop person launches it, says, "Do you have it, Jason?" Jason says, "Yeah, I got it." They transfer control of the flight to Jason 10 miles away. He controls the flight up and back. But if Jason lost something or couldn't operate the drone anymore, his controls went down, I, on the roof, could still control that drone and bring it back and land it. So
that's a contracted service that you use for all, and it's the same firm for all of
correct, but the person on that roof has no role in that call for service beyond just getting that drone up. Everything else falls on the pilot back in Rockville.
How do you handle if you have a violation, like with the FAA?
Like if we violate something? Or?
They're not very friendly. They're not very forgiving.
We have a good relationship. We have not violated anything because we don't do this willy-nilly. We have, before you even get to touch that PlayStation 5 controller, you've already gone through 4 courses of training. There's supervision. We have a program manager that oversees the program. So we have a lot of procedures in-house that people get trained on. So we're very aware, all of our pilots has to show proficiency in awareness of the waivers and the airspace rules. If we were to violate a rule, we could be sanctioned by the FAA, and to include them suspending our waiver, our ability to fly. So we take it very seriously. We abide by all the rules. And the thing that why we're successful with them is because relationships. That's another partner, another stakeholder that we met with before we did this. We went down to DC. We showed them everything we're doing. We've actually had them, TSA and FAA, up to our operations center to view. Everything's an open book. We talk about transparency. It's even on the backside. Hey, you want to see our rules? You want to see our procedures, how we do things? So we've had our federal partners come in and inspect what we're doing, even in Rockville at our office. So we have not violated anything, and that's our goal. But if someone was to violate something, not only could there be federal sanctions, but also department violations and rules and
the program would be suspended for sure.
Two more questions, Richard, please. Okay, I know. So the policies that you talk about, and I like what you said. You don't go out for sound, non-safety issues, et cetera. Are all of those published somewhere so that the public understands how you're using that? That's one question. And then the last question really has to do with FOIA of drone footage and also prosecutorial use of your drone footage. Have you found that you've received requests, since you guys are going out, you're getting a lot of footage, people saying, well, I want to know what they're looking at?
So we've had media requests, and obviously we have requests through the judicial system, right? So we have cases that have since come up in court. So defense attorneys have been given copies of footage, prosecutors, obviously. There's been most of the cases that have come up involving the drone have resulted in pleas. We did have one case go to trial where the video was utilized. That was the stabbing I talked about that resulted in a guilty verdict. So the video has been made available, but it's only been used in one case. Like we had a DUI where the drone saw the guy drive through a fence, and usually when you see that video, the defense attorney talks to the client and something happens. They work it out. But when it comes to any other video requests, obviously the public, it's the same as any other video we have. If someone made a request, it would go through our process for that as well. The calls, we have discussed them publicly in testimony with our counsel and things of that nature. We do have an internal list of calls we don't fly. It's not classified by any means. We've talked about it, but we don't have that list on our website. We do plan to have that part of some annual reporting that we do that'll be put out to the community, but we don't have it. We don't have that exact procedure published online, but it's also not a secret.
Thank you.
All right, so here's where we're going to go. This has gone, not surprisingly, a little longer than I thought it might. But I am going to take the people who haven't asked questions yet, then I'll take a couple people seeking second bites, but then I'm going to stop because Mr. Stanley is being very patient and waiting to take questions as well. Now for her very first question before the committee. And a long and deliberate pause. Delegate Congolo.
All right.
Oh, don't touch it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is very simple. I just wanted to know if there were any technical limitations to using the drone. So if you were given the FAA waiver and you were to replace the drone, replace a human with the drone, is there any issues with battery life, any issues with inclement weather that could affect or impact drone performance?
Sure. Let Lieutenant Galador answer that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like any technology, there are absolutely limitations. Battery life is currently about 55 minutes. But again, drone technology is evolving so fast and so rapidly. About every 2 or 3 years, we're seeing significant improvements. So we do expect the technology to continue increasing. The drone in the box, as we're seeing that technology getting much better and being able to go further safely. So the technology's moving. There are limitations. Weather is absolutely a limitation, just like a crewed helicopter. We don't fly in bad weather. We have safety thresholds, for wind and weather-related concerns. Absolutely.
And that's one of our downsides, as with anything. Yep. And you even saw that out in California. Why aren't the planes dumping water? Well, the winds are too high. They can't fly. Mm-hmm. Same thing with drones. If it's a heavy rainy day, we may not be able to fly, heavy winds. So there's a lot of impact from weather, but also limitations on technology as well. Like Tony said, the battery life is the biggest issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
I'll go ahead and get another question someday. Delegate Taylor.
And thank you, Chief and officers, for being here today. This has been a perfect briefing for my intern for his first day in our committee, Joshua Looper from Prince George's Community College. I don't recall you saying or mentioning a difference in policy between flying drones in residential areas versus commercial areas. And that's sort of the question, is there a difference in your policy? And the other question kind of piggybacks on Delegate Phillips' question about the video, right? So are you videoing en route to, the scene, or does the camera turn on once you get there? And, kind of you can understand where I'm getting at, especially if you're in a residential neighborhood and you're flying through, seeing things as you go. And then I think you could remember this one too, is how do I distinguish between your drone and some individually operated drone, somebody just flying around a drone in my neighborhood?
So a couple of things. The policy applies countywide. It wouldn't change from downtown Silver Spring to Poolsville on a farm. So the policies apply throughout.
Okay.
The camera piece is, as you heard Captain Kokino say, is pointed up until we get, quote, on scene. So within the area of the call. So up until that point, the camera is pointed at the horizon. You wouldn't see anything at all. Okay. And that is all captured somewhere. If somebody were to question it, we could prove that is the case. But the camera is pointed at a certain angle. When it gets on scene, it drops down and then begins recording. And when it's done, The camera goes back up and it flies back and it's not recording anymore.
Yeah, we don't record to and from, and we don't have the camera down while we're going for that reason, exactly. Especially because that was one thing we talked about with our community members. Like, we don't want to see people's backyards. The goal and what we've said since the beginning, and we've been doing it, is the least amount of visual intrusion. And that visual intrusion only being related to the emergency. So we don't want to have the camera down anyway. So there's no camera down when it's going. It doesn't record. When we fly to 911 calls, and like Chief said, residential or commercial, it's still the same policy. And if you wanted to know, was that a police drone or not, our flight maps are published frequently within an hour or two. We tell the community within 24 hours, but what is it, under promise, over deliver. So most of the time our flight maps are up by the end of that shift. The pilots are doing that administrative work. So you could go to our website. You can immediately see if based on your location, if there was a drone path that flew over. Obviously, we welcome people, if they're concerned, to always call our 911 center. If they, every flight with our drone is logged on the computer through the dispatch center. So they'll know if our drone was on an emergency, because we assign ourselves in the computer to every call that we go to for tracking purposes.
So you can call 911 and say, is there a drone, police-related drone or incident near my house? And they would say yes or no.
Yep.
Okay. But there's no distinguishing marks or anything? The lights aren't different, the size is not different?
Well, the size could be different. Our drones, first responder drones, are generally bigger than the hobbyist drone, although it's available for commercial purchase as well. So somebody could have one that big. Our other drones that are smaller that we use for search and rescue and stuff, a community member could purchase those as well. So there's nothing that would distinguish it, especially at that height. Some police departments put stickers or an emblem on their drone, but at 300 feet, you're not going to be able to tell.
Yeah. Thank you.
Delegates Williams and Valentine, then Conaway and Tolles, and then we're moving on. Delegate Williams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, gentlemen, for being here. This has been really enlightening. Question that I had, you mentioned some of the jurisdictions within Montgomery County that you traverse, some of which are municipalities, and some of which I think have their own police departments. And so my question is there any coordination that you have to undergo when you are in those jurisdictions that also have their separate, those municipalities that when they have their separate police departments?
Yeah, we engage those jurisdictions. Like, for example, Gaithersburg, we just expanded to the Gaithersburg, Montgomery Village area. We met multiple times with Gaithersburg City Police to tell them what's going on. The municipalities' police departments love it because they're getting air support at no cost to their own city budget. So they're okay with it. But we do make sure, if we're going to be flying in Gaithersburg or parts of Tacoma Park, that we have already pre-discussed. And actually with Gaithersburg, it was really a model, I think, in my opinion. Before we deployed the drone, we went to their police station and met with their officers and gave them a training on what the drone can do, what it can't do, what it looks like, so that when that drone started being operational, we didn't want any officers caught off guard. So city and county, we kind of treat everybody as one team and we all work together.
Okay.
In return, those municipalities, Gaithersburg City in particular, has offered to send officers through our pilot program so that their people can then serve as pilots. So the workload, it wouldn't cost us so much.
Got it. Got it. And then I have a follow-up question, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. You mentioned the training. That was one of my other questions. If you could elaborate more about the training that the officers have to undergo, how many hours does that consist of, and things like that?
Yeah, so everybody has to go through a 40-hour basic drone operate. Well, it starts before that. They have to go through training and pass the FAA Part 107 certification, which you have to go to an airport, sit at a controlled terminal and take a test. It's actually not easy. You have to do a lot of studying beforehand. You need to understand weather and wind flows and everything related to aircraft. So you have to have that before you can even apply to be a part of this unit. In order to become a drone pilot in Montgomery County, you have to go through a selection process, interview, some type of skills assessment. Then you get in, then you go to a basic drone 40-hour school. There's training that you have to do a certain number of shifts in our mobile drone truck, a minimum of 2 10-hour days or 5-hour shifts, I think, actually. Then you're kind of clear to start working under the tutelage of a more experienced pilot in that field. To get to the Drone as First Responder program, after already being certified in basic operations in the other types of drone work, you come up first and you serve as an air support officer. So you're not touching the PS5 controller, you're not doing anything. Think if you have a helicopter, you have a pilot in police aviation, and you have your tactical flight officer. Your tactical flight officer, in our case, we call it air support officer. They'll work the computer, they'll work the police radio. We have a policy where we call a lot of our 911 callers from the operations room. So they're doing all that kind of assistant work, looking at maps, setting up perimeters. So there's a one-day training for that. And then you have to serve in that role for at least, we've been doing at least 3 to 4 months before you're even remotely considered to be trained on the other side, which is the teleoperator, the remote operator. That is a 2-day course with skills, and we put them through the National Institutes of Standard and Technology bucket courses. So there's certifications and testing within that. Once you pass that course, there's a test and skills testing. Then you go into a field training program. You have to complete, I think we're getting ready to change it. It was 10 flights in 20 hours. I think we're about to go up to 40 hours and 20 flights. You have to be supervised by a pilot training officer kind of standing behind you while you operate this, and you're mentored through that. And then after you are signed off by the program director, then you're free to work on your own. So it is probably almost to get trained in all that, it could take upwards of 10 months depending. So it's not something that we make happen quick because there is so much to absorb even with just the FAA policy and regulations and stuff.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Delegate Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, panel, for such a wonderful presentation today, very informative. The majority of my questions have already been answered either by yourselves or my colleagues have asked those questions, but I did have 2. For a drone launch, how labor intensive is it? I thought I had this question answered. So is it a component of someone in the operations center that's monitoring like a CAD system and an operator and someone on a rooftop that's actually launching? So does it take 3 people to start a mission?
So we have a minimum of 2 people that if you want to talk about how it happens, there's a minimum of 2 people right now. Again, with the future technology and the future regulatory changes, it could just be 1 person in the future. But right now for us, it's a minimum of 2. So what happens is you have the person on the roof. They have already safety checked the aircraft. It's sitting on a landing pad. It's turned on and it's ready to go. They're just sitting there kind of hanging out. The person in the operations room is monitoring those 911 calls, that radio traffic, the CAD or whatever. They identify a flight that meets what we're allowed to fly for, what we would bring value to. They will tell the person on the roof, operations center to the roof location, we have a flight, it's going to be northwest of you. That rooftop person says, okay, the airspace is safe, send it. The person in the operations room, while they're communicating, type in the address. They click that. Once the person on the roof acknowledges that everything's safe, the drone will take off through the software. It'll fly on GPS to the location under the observation of the rooftop person.
Right.
And then when the drone gets on scene, the operations room can control it.
By the person who initially, is it that?
Operations room controls everything.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the person on the roof can take control in an in-flight emergency or a safety issue if it has to. So for us, they communicate as a partnership, the roof and the operations room. We have people on the roof that sometimes will say, hey, it appears we have a low-flying military helicopter, coming up from DC. We're aware, we can see it on we have flight tracking in our operations room. We coordinate if we need to make evasive actions. The operations room is the first line to control everything. If the roof's taking back over, there's something a little more significant happening.
both of those positions, everyone in that task, they're all sworn. These are all sworn positions?
Not the person on the roof.
Yeah, the rooftop person is a civilian contractor who's FA Part 107 certified and stuff like that. The operations room does have sworn officers.
Within it?
Within that, yes.
And my last question is, what is your standard retention period? You touched on it a couple times, but you never gave us an actual, for just a standard flight that may not have a charged component that may require a longer period. What's your standard retention for video?
So we store our video for 210 days, and we're in the process of switching that to 366. I think it's going to be 370 because of the local government claims stuff. So we're going to be retaining it for a year.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Conaway.
Panel, as a first responder, you touched upon warrants, but you didn't say exactly how this technology be used in helping with warrants. And you spoke about heat signatures, using heat signatures through walls of the structure. And does the drone have auto check once you lock onto a target? Can you use the computers or whatever to track the target on the run or on the move?
So the heat signatures, we don't see through any structures. We don't see anything. The heat is exclusively if someone's outside, say walking across the field. So there's no visual intrusion through walls or anything like that. There's no radar capability or heat signature capability. With regards to locking on target, our program does not have the ability to lock on to something and follow it around. Sure, that technology exists. We don't have that. With regards to the Fourth Amendment, so when we're flying in the DFR 911 calls, obviously we're operating over public space and we're focused on outdoor emergencies. Another thing we won't fly for, it's not on our prohibited list, but there's a list of things that just aren't valuable. So if there's an emergency that's inside someone's home and say it's a domestic call and there's no information that anyone's outside, well, the drone's not really helpful because we can't see into the house. We're not using it in that way. Now, if someone is reported to have committed a crime in a home and runs outside, that's when the drone can be helpful for us. The only time we're putting the drone inside of a structure has nothing to do with the drone's first responder program. That is part of our tactical program, and that is being done with an active search warrant, some type of judicial approval in that fashion, or if there's some type of exigent, if we're having a hostage situation and the SWAT team goes in, they may put the drone in, but we're not incorporating the drone into any protected space absent anything like that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. This is about some federal regulations. I noticed like during the Army-Navy game, as I was, trying to do a quick little search here, there were some concerns about, DOJ saying you can't fly over like Army-Navy game. And so could you talk about, I guess, those restrictions? Do you have those? Is it for you all, or is it just private citizens? But let's just say something happened and you would need to fly over that for some security reasons, safety reasons. Would you be allowed to do so, or are you prohibited as well?
So when there's a temporary flight restriction that's put up, it could be for any number of reasons. Could be, you'll see them, they should be up above, Raven Stadium and stuff, and
I would probably go with Commanders.
Commanders, there you go, Commanders.
I mean, because we are one of Maryland's teams, right? And we are in the playoffs. So I'm sorry, I'm digressing. Back to the digressing. See what I'm saying? Okay,
I could just make everybody mad.
Stadium.
I'm an Eagles fan. Hey, we might see you in the NFC Championship game.
I think you will.
We'll
I'll do you one better. I'll do you one.
Want to repeat of what happened.
He's even worse. He's a Cowboys fan. Yeah, I brought this guy. Jesus.
Oh. Did you like that last minute catch? I'm sorry.
So
you got the best seat in the house at home, right? That's walk away.
One.
With a temporary flight restriction, that does apply to everybody. However, down in Montgomery County, we sometimes deal with flight restricted stuff due to presidential movements, state of the, different things like that. So for law enforcement, public safety, if there's a flight restriction, you may be able to call and get individual approval. Okay. So for example, we were under a flight restricted for State of the Union. Or different things that expand out of DC. We'll generally stand down our flights out of courtesy because we can fly, but we have to call each time to a hotline and get individual approval. A normal community member would be prohibited from flying within a flight restricted zone area, temporary or established, without some type of approval. But absent public safety, there should be nothing going on in there.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yep. Go Commanders. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all very, very much. Thanks for speaking here with us today. It's very informative, but we're not done yet. So we're going to ask you, if you please, to step back, and we're going to hear from Mr. Stanley, who's here from the ACLU. Mr. Jay Stanley, I'm sorry, say that again?
Invite any single committee member or the entire committee to come to the drone operation room to see what we got. Sure. Anytime you want.
Appreciate that. We do. Mr. Stanley was also on the panel that I emceed at Mako in Ocean City. There are a lot of issues, and the members of the committee have been touching on a lot of the constitutional issues that also come into play here, and this is a rapidly changing area of the law and a rapidly changing technology, and so there are questions that need to be addressed and need to be asked. I think Montgomery County has participated in some of those things, but there are always still more issues that are going to come up. And so I appreciate you taking the time and listening to us talk about the Cowboys for exactly the right amount of time. We don't need to talk about them anymore. But Mr. Stanley, if you talk to us, please, about some of the constitutional issues that are involved here.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here. Is my mic on now? Okay. I gathered that it was turned on automatically from earlier. So, yeah, I really appreciate your attention to this issue, because all too often what we see is that technologies like this just sort of slide into American life with nobody stopping to think about it and analyze it and give it the thought that's necessary. I mean, this is really a brand new human capability in the sweep of history to have flying video cameras over our communities. And I can't emphasize enough that we are in very early days of this technology still. And we expect, and I think it's reasonable to expect, if you follow this area, that the technology is really going to expand. It's going to expand geographically. Right now, there's a relatively small number of police departments that are using it. I don't have an exact number. It's probably 20 or 30 or somewhere around there. But there are 16,000 to 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. There's a strong interest in law enforcement in these programs, and as the officer said, we're seeing the costs go down, and we're seeing the technology get better. We're also seeing the FAA is moving towards, and it's been ordered by Congress to move towards loosening the rules around when and how you can fly drones. So right now, you have to get a special waiver from the FAA to fly BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight. But the FAA is currently working on rules, expected to issue a proposed rulemaking soon, allowing by right BVLOS flights. Anybody who fits certain conditions can fly BVLOS. This is really going to open up the skies to a lot more law enforcement drones. And the big question is, we have what's going on now, but I'm at the National ACLU. My purview is nationally. I'm watching this technology across the country, and where is it going to go? And I think that there's some easily predictable problems that may arise. It can expand not just geographically, more and more departments adopting it, but also it could expand in scope. We see right now a lot of talk about its use just for emergencies, but for example, the Flock ALPR, the Flock license plate reader company has just bought a drone company, and now they want to send drones every time there's a hit on a license plate reader. We could see it evolving, and again, I'm not talking about Montgomery County here, I'm talking about the big picture here. I'll talk about Montgomery County as well. But we could see it evolving from responses to anticipatory flights. Well, and there was a guy in Santa Monica, which is already doing this apparently in California. An officer told a reporter, say we have a specific structure, a parking structure where we're constantly having vehicle burglaries. Well, we may just do a patrol over there. We could see it evolve into, routine patrols in certain neighborhoods, and we could see it expanding routine patrols to cover an entire city. I'm only aware of one jurisdiction in America that's using this technology now for routine patrols. That's Beverly Hills. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware, nowhere else is using the patrols. We are vehemently against patrols. And the history of surveillance suggests that some police departments at least, do really like to expand the scope of surveillance of their communities. We've seen the mayor of Ogden, Utah wanted to put up a big blimp up high in the air with video cameras pointing down on the community. We've seen law enforcement blanketing cities with surveillance cameras and license plate readers. We saw an attempt in Baltimore to use a gigapixel camera in a crewed aircraft that could videotape a 32 square mile area, and so forth. And so as a result, these programs really merit close attention from policymakers such as yourselves. We are deeply skeptical about their utility and the trade-offs they entail. Certainly, we understand a lot of the practical advantages that drones can bring. We recognize that there are good uses for drones. Finding a lost child, for example, at night is a great use of the technology. But we do worry about evolving or stumbling into a world where we just have government, police, video cameras hovering over us all day, crisscrossing the skies. And I think that there's good reason to see why we are headed towards that kind of a world. One other note here, which is that in my experience, where I work at the ACLU, these privacy issues are much more bipartisan than most of the issues the ACLU works on. I get a lot of support from people in all walks of life. I get support from people who live in the suburbs, who live in historically over-policed, underprivileged neighborhoods. I get a lot of support from MAGA people, and I think that a lot of Americans have concerns, and we have a long tradition of skepticism of government surveillance in this country. So I'm going to talk about what kind of limits and guardrails, if these programs are to go forward quickly, what kind of limits and guardrails should we have? There are some limits and guardrails that we think should apply to all drone usages by law enforcement. Usages restrictions so that they're not used for, basically confining the usages. Image retention restrictions, public notice, democratic control. There are many technologies and there are many police departmts where, unlike in Montgomery County, there's no consultation with the community, but what I call policymaking by procurement, where the police department just goes out and buys it and starts using it, even though it's a highly controversial and invasive technology, without sometimes telling, let alone asking, democratic elected bodies that represent the community. And we think that auditing and effectiveness tracking are very important. These are brand new technologies, and if policymakers such as yourselves are to figure out how to evaluate them, we need good information about exactly what they're doing, whether they're effective, et cetera. Drones as first responder programs in particular, I mean, the danger, again, is just that our skies will be darkened with law enforcement drones if in the nature of things, these things continue to expand. We often see these kinds of things justified by anecdotes. Let me tell you the story about how our technology saved the day in this situation and that situation. And there are some very compelling anecdotes with DFR programs. The question to ask is, but a story doesn't end the day. The question to ask is, how important were those things and how often do they happen and what are the other things that are happening on the side? We hear a lot of dramatic stories out of Chula Vista and other places that are in California, which was the sort of the original deployer of this, about dramatic stories, and there are stories, and the most compelling ones are where the DFR program means that a police officer isn't sent or that a person isn't at risk of being shot because the police get advance information that it's not a gun, but it's a cell phone or the like. But At the same time, it seems as though a lot of the flights by a lot of police agencies are very routine, like basically about clearing calls. And so they're sending out a drone because they got a report about a kid bouncing a ball against a garage and the like. And so, one of the questions is, over time, how is this going to expand? So we think that there need to be usage limits on this, limits on the circumstances under which those drones are deployed, restricting them, to the larger emergencies so that they're not being sent out every 5 minutes constantly as a constant presence over communities. We think that transparency is crucial here, as I just mentioned. Information about the flight, as Montgomery County is doing. Capabilities and sensor payloads. I mean, drones are a platform. They can carry cameras, but they can also carry a bunch of other things: night vision, radar, LiDAR, cell phone tracking tools, chemical and biological sensors, and so forth. And the public should have a right to know what its law enforcement is capable of doing and watching. Performance and results, and huge transparency questions as came up around the video. And we did a deep dive on this around body cameras, because these are very tricky issues. Body cameras and drone video can, number one, capture things like people experiencing relatively private, mental health crises, domestic violence crises, and the like. And that video is pretty private, and there's really not a public interest in having that on YouTube, and it shouldn't be on YouTube. There are privacy issues there. There's also transparency issues. If a DFR drone captures a police officer shooting somebody, what will happen to that video? In many jurisdictions in America, police departments try to bury that kind of video, and they refuse to release it. We've seen protest marches, release the video. And so there needs to be good policies around exactly when there's a public interest, there's a compelling interest in the public seeing video and understanding how the law enforcement officers that serve the community are using their extraordinary powers, including in some circumstances the power to kill. And so we think those videos need to be made public. I can go into the details about sort of our recommended video policies when we have them written up on body cameras. And I was pleased to hear that in Montgomery County, they apply the same policy to all video, which I think makes sense. I won't go into all the details here, but if anybody is curious, we have thought it through in great detail. And then privacy rules should govern these things. Recording policies, is it recorded en route? What is done with a camera en route? What kind of data sharing and retention is there? We think that basically imagery that is collected should not be shared with other parties unless there's reasonable suspicion that it's relevant to an ongoing criminal or pending criminal trial. If it's evidence, then it's treated like other evidence. Or if it captures a police use of force or captures incidents that are the subject of a complaint against a police officer. We think that the data that is stored should be stored for a reasonable period of time to allow for people to file complaints against police officers, but then destroyed within a reasonable time, such as 60 or 90 days. And that data should not be subject to AI analytics, shouldn't be shared. It should just be basically kept in a lockbox, because there's a lot of private stuff that is captured by those kinds of things, both body cameras and potentially drones as well. There are questions around the private companies, the contractors that are working for police departments. What kind of data do they have access to? What are the contractual and other policy obligations that prevent them from using the data? We're living in an age of AI where video data is or data of any kind is very tempting because everybody wants to use it to train AIs. And that means that potentially data that should only be in the hands of law enforcement could be in the hands of like these private companies. What if there's a labor action against Amazon and some Amazon subsidiary is gaining all this insight into police data? There are questions around that. And then, we have a lot of questions around drones over public gatherings as well. And this is an issue that's coming up across the nation. It's one of the biggest use cases for drones is what is often called sort of events monitoring. And so we think that there need to be limits around that as well, and guardrails around exactly when and how and under what circumstances police can monitor events. One question, for example, is can the police use a drone and not turn on the recording? People often forget, just because it has a video camera on there doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be recording all the time. Sometimes it can just be monitored live. Montgomery County is doing a lot of things right, and I really commend the police department and I commend the county council and the community for, really putting in place a lot of good checks and balances that we have called for. But still there are larger questions around where we're going as a country and where we're going as communities in terms of having flying police video cameras over our homes and communities. And in terms of Montgomery County doing so many things right, and there are other things they could probably improve, but the bad news is that it's all downhill from there. There are a lot of communities in this country, and the Montgomery community has paid a lot of attention to this. A lot that I'm seeing are not. They're not doing transparency portals, et cetera, et cetera. And so as I think is probably going to happen, which is that this technology spreads to other counties in Maryland, perhaps someday all counties in Maryland, are they all going to, have these same protections? That's one big question. One thing that we generally see is that when there's a brand new technology that is controversial, that people are freaked out about, and that is brand new and where the spotlight is on it, government agencies tend to be in their best behavior. But we're just living it in these ways. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. But it becomes normalized over time. Other pressures come up. So number one, you get a bell curve. You have the best police departments, and you have some really bad police departments in this country. I don't know enough about Maryland, county by county, but so you have police departments that are very troubled and that have troubled relationships with their communities, and there's a bell curve there, but also over time you get personnel turnover and so forth. People forget the original concerns that a community had, and so I think that there's a reason to not be complacent and say, oh, this sounds really good, it sounds like a cost saver and so forth, and to not worry about where this is headed in the future. And I think that the transparency is important, and in particular, sort of having precise data on the flights, which is admirable, the extent to which the county has logged flights and the purposes for the flights. Some of the data is a little fuzzy, some of it's a little vague, it's not clear. The various things about it are not clear, and I think there's room for improvement there. We see with a lot of technologies around the country, including face recognition, license plate readers, and so forth, a lot of police agencies engaging in kind of fuzzy triumphalism. This new technology played a role in saving the day in this case, or it was involved in saving the day in this case. Well, what does played a role mean? What does was involved mean? Does it mean that if you didn't have the technology, you wouldn't have saved the day? Or was it just sort of one of the things that was going on when good old-fashioned police work actually saved the day? So I think as policymakers, there's going to be an ongoing real need to really monitor and ask serious questions beyond the surface level about the role of this technology. So I'll leave it at that. And again, I commend you for focusing on this technology. It doesn't happen enough that policymakers look a little bit at what's brand new and ask questions about where it's going and exactly, whether it's at the end of the day a good way of spending the community's resources, or whether there are other ways of spending those resources that might do more to improve the life of the community.
Certainly appears to be one of the rare times where we might actually be a little bit ahead of the curve, at least for the moment. So I think that's something that that's part of the reason why we're having a briefing here today. And I really appreciate you coming in and raising some of the issues that you're seeing nationally on this. I will take questions, and I see I'm going to go this way this time. Delegate Cardin, then Conaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for coming in and for your presentation. Really appreciate it. So it seems as if a lot of the concerns that you brought up, which I share many of them, I really do, were already I wouldn't say preempted, but considered by Montgomery County in taking into consideration their policies, the data collection versus anecdotal evidence, the question of random videoing while en route. All these policies have already been considered and been dealt with in a way that I would think the ACLU would say, these are good policies, this should be a model for the nation. Perhaps it would be appropriate for the ACLU to work with Montgomery County to help create a model for the rest of the country. That might be something to think about. But you mentioned, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times the word, police cameras filling the sky. I think it was, you filled the sky above us with all these police cameras. And so my question, or I'd like you to comment on the fact that I think that the police, at least in Maryland, are like a micro amount of the number of drones that are flying around, taking pictures and being cameras in the state of Maryland. And all these private, shouldn't the ACLU be concerned about all these, the 99% that are non-police related, that are possibly doing the same or even worse types of activities? So that would be question number 1. And
that's question number 1.
That's it. That's it. That will just be question number 1.
That's a substantive question. That's a substantive question, and it does go to kind of, yeah. I'd like you to talk about that for a second. Then.
Yeah. No, it's a very fair point. We do worry about other ways in which our privacy can be invaded. There can be an extent to which that can evolve into like a leaky boat argument, which is to say, like, don't worry about that leak under your seat because it's leaking over there. Well, you have to worry about all the leaks in the boat, right? And yes, I think that private drone use, for example, if the FAA allows by right BVLOS flights, that will open up the sky to Amazon deliveries by drone in a way that's not been done before, except for instance certain experiments in Texas and the like. What's Amazon going to be doing with their cameras that are pointing down and crisscrossing the neighborhood? What are they going to be doing with that footage? And I would just add that we are in an age of AI. These are not video cameras from the 1990s. You don't often need a human to review them or watch them for them to flag things. You can run it through an AI, say, here's 10,000 hours of video. Point me any video that includes a marijuana plant or the like, right? That's increasingly becoming possible. And so the sensitivity of video that's collected is going to increase. That can be done by Amazon, it can be done by law enforcement. And we worry about both.
Can I follow up real quick? Yeah. So reasonable expectation of privacy with cameras in public. So I didn't hear it, so I'm assuming you didn't say that there's violations of people's Fourth Amendment rights in what they're doing, even these private folks or the public folks. I guess with Maryland being a 2-state in terms of audio, but in terms of video, there's no issues there constitutionally, is there? Yeah,
it's a hugely complicated thing I could talk about for a long time. This idea, do you have privacy when you're in public or not? And our Supreme Court and other courts are still grappling with that. And basically, what the courts have decided is that yes, you do have privacy in public if you are tracked across space and time. So for example, the plane that was flying above Baltimore with the gigapixel camera on it could track people across an entire city for hours and hours and days and weeks and weeks. That kind of tracking, including cellular location data, where the Supreme Court found that the law enforcement needs a warrant to access your historical cell site location records because it tracks you across space and time, and it's so sensitive, it can reveal so many things about your life. Law enforcement put a GPS on a suspected drug dealer's car, left on there for 28 days, followed him around without a warrant. Government said, well, he was driving around in public, he had no reasonable expectation of privacy, and the Supreme Court ruled that yes, actually he did have a Fourth Amendment interest in his whereabouts. So everybody's grappling with that. There is a right to photography, which we defend, and But in terms of having, for example, if you, if you have a house and somebody has a drone over your backyard, the law is still trying to figure out what we think about that. Because all the previous law is based on like aircraft and helicopters to some extent. And certainly the courts have ruled that a quick flyover is okay, but if it's persistent and repeated over time, then it begins to change the constitutional calculus. Police helicopters have been with us a long time, but police helicopters are expensive. And that imposes sort of a natural limit on how much sort of surveillance from the air police have been able to do. But I mean, you could have drones, and the officers talked about, going from 3 people to 1 person. I mean, you could have 0 people. Really, it's as a technological matter. I don't know what the regulations, what the FAA will say, but you could have a fleet of autonomous drones that land and take off and recharge themselves and just go in shifts. I think that I think that Montgomery County is amongst the best in terms of the policies, and we do applaud that. But I think there's an opportunity for Maryland to be a real leader by making sure that this isn't just up to each of the 16,000 police departments in America, because then you're going to get a bell curve and you get some really crummy programs. But that it's encoded into law at whether the local or state level. I leave it up to you. But
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming in to testify. As you know, this committee championed the police-worn body cameras. It took us about 3 years to get that complete.
Whose bill was that?
I believe that was the chairman's bill. Yeah.
Before that, whose bill?
It was my bill.
Yes.
Okay. So I understand what you're saying about the police patrols, but we're trying to deal with public safety here, and we found out with 2 blimps, you could cover all of Baltimore City, so the whole sky doesn't have to be illuminated with these drones. But we could use a standard pattern to do patrol like police officers do. My question is, what is wrong with a drone being deployed when there's a hit on a license plate, as you commented on?
I think that hits on license plates are very, very common, and it's just that many more law enforcement aircraft crisscrossing our communities. Now, some of that can be addressed with policies such as not having the cameras on, pointing down and recording.
They're not going to do.
But a lot of police departments may not have those rules in place. They may have the thing down. They may record constantly. Some agencies want their cameras on constantly because they want to monitor the officers who are flying them, for example. This is a big country, and there's a lot of things that are going to happen, and I think that it's a bad idea to sort of trust in a department being really as responsive to the community and transparent and following these rules, and I think that there needs to be some oversight in it.
Well, I thank you very much for your testimony, but I'd like for you to keep in mind we're on our way to Mars and we're up on the moon. So thank you.
All right. I don't see further questions from the committee. Really do appreciate you taking the time, all of you taking the time today. Councilwoman Lutke has been there and sitting. She has been working on this issue in Montgomery County, and so she's available if any members of the committee would like to speak with her after we adjourn for questions. And thank you very much for being here, and everybody for being here today. I think this has been very informative, and I suspect legislation is in our future. So with that, we will be back tomorrow. What are we doing tomorrow again? Oh, felony murder. All right. Delegate, we're not committing felony murder tomorrow. All right. Yes. Thank you all very much.